Welcome back, friends, and we want to let you know what's going on M Go Blue Podcasts. We obviously have a family of podcasts in the trenches, which you have tuned in for. We also have Defend the Block, which is back. That covers the Michigan basketball team, and our very own Brian Bush sat down with Vlad Golden. He is our star this week, our guest. Conquering Heroes, which covers everybody that is not involved with football or basketball, with the athletic department. And on Thursday, we all know that we're celebrating another national title here in Ann Arbor. Captain of the men's national champion gymnastics team, that's Zach Granados, and it's a great interview. I would encourage everybody to make sure that you like, subscribe, download, to make sure that one's in your inbox, because he did a great job of describing what this year was like, some of the downturns that they had, how they used those to motivate themselves, and the final moments. What was that like before Paul Judah took to the floor for his final event? And Zach's going to go through all of that with us. So excited for you guys to hear that conversation. But at this point, I want to bring in my partner, Mr. Brian Bush, the aforementioned Mr. Brian Bush, and voice of the men's basketball program. How you doing, Brian?
I'm great, John. We are here late April. The NFL draft is in the books, and that's our focus for today. A lot to talk about. I think we both represented ourselves pretty well in last week's video-only mock draft.
Yeah, I think it went well. I mean, I had Will Johnson go to the Cardinals, I think. It just felt like it was going to be in the first round versus the second round, but hey, we'll talk about that.
And unfortunately, as we'll talk about here shortly, for Lions fans, Ben Johnson might have his new Sam Laporta, as I had mentioned. But let's go down the line and talk about from the top Wolverines selected to the undrafted free agents. That's our 7 from 77 here this week. So let's start with a bit of a surprising landing spot based on the draft order going into Thursday. Cleveland trades down from 2 to 5, picks up an extra first-round pick, with Jacksonville moving up for Travis Hunter. And then the Browns, there were some rumors they might trade down again. They felt vindicated and locked into Mason Graham. A lot to rebuild in Cleveland. Graham and Myles Garrett, though, John Jansen, feels like one heck of a combination. Your thoughts on that landing spot for Mason?
That's a tough front. That is an absolute bear of a front to be trying to scheme up with Mason Graham and his ability to push the pocket, his ability to take on double team, shed blocks, and get down the line of scrimmage. And then obviously Myles Garrett, we know what he can do. I mean, he's been twice Defensive Player of the Year. So I think it's a great combination. And I think it's one that I'm sure Myles Garrett was excited to see, give him more great players to play with up front. And that's a defense that's going to have to be really good. Still have no idea what's going on with the quarterback situation there. They've got 5 of them. One of them obviously being Deshaun Watson. We'll talk more about the trade later in the program, but I thought it was an absolute fleecing of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So great job by Cleveland to be able to get cheap young talent and good young talent, because they need a lot of it. They're not in a great cap situation. So to be able to add a player like Mason Graham and add a couple of picks this year, add a couple picks next year, I think it was a tremendous job. And I think Tennessee is really hoping that Travis Hunter is the first guy that they give 2 gold jackets to, 1 for each side of the ball.
Jacksonville, not Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee. Yeah. We'll talk about Khalil later, but yeah, it's Jacksonville.
There you go. Number 2 on our 7 from 77, the Bears' first selection in the Ben Johnson era is Michigan tight end Colston Loveland at number 10. It was interesting. I think it was Ian Rappaport had the report earlier this week saying that there were a lot of calls trying to move up in that 7 to 10 range. And once Colston Loveland went off the board, Rappaport said that the calls slowed down significantly. Thoughts on how Colston Loveland, along with second-round pick Luther Burden for Missouri, sets up? I mean, I think Loveland was the top tight end on the board. I mentioned this as a possibility at number 10, and I'm fascinated to see what Loveland can do with the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, you go obviously wide receiver and you go tight end at the top of your draft, and then you go offensive tackle right after that, still in the second round. They have addressed and tried to absolutely rebuild this offense as quickly as possible. I'll talk about Colston real quick in regards to the Ben Johnson offense and his reference to Sam Laporta. It fits perfectly. You need a vertical tight end and somebody that can attack the middle of the field. I've talked about the pros and cons of whether it was Tyler Warren or our guy in terms of excuse me, something in my throat there. Colston Loveland, in regards to his ability to find the nooks and crannies, his ability to study defenses, study the offensive playbook, and really build a relationship with the young quarterback. We saw him do it here with JJ. Now he gets to do it there with Caleb Williams. And I think it's a great weapon. That offense has to have a dynamic tight end, a pass-catching tight end. And I know he's done a better job of setting the edge in the run game. It's still something that he needs to continue to work on, pad level, all those things. They like a lot of running back screens, and you're going to see a lot of that. And he does a good job of, if nothing else, being a speed bump in space because he's just that good of an athlete. But his catch radius, his ability to read defenses and actually go up there and get the ball, I think is really going to add a lot to this offense. And when you think about what they've done, Luther Burden, we talked about him in the second round. I'm curious. They drafted Ozzie Trapillo in the second round, later in the second round. They already had Darnell Wright, who they drafted in the first round last year. And both of them are right tackles. So one of them is going to have to move over to left because I know Braxton Jones was probably the weak link of that offensive line, or at least the weakest link of that offensive line last year. And he's the only guy that's still there because they've got Tooney at left guard, Dahlman, who they acquired from in free agency from the Falcons at center, and then Jonah Jackson, who we know here in Detroit was, here, went to the Rams. Now he's reunited with Ben Johnson in Chicago. Completely remake of that offensive line, tight end, wide receiver, and it feels like they wanted to add another offensive weapon, a running back, and it just felt like that running back just kind of always was off the board, the one that they wanted right before they picked. So that's maybe the last piece to this puzzle. But I think they're set up for having a much better year offensively than they've had.
And circumstantially, as you mentioned, without getting a running back until Kyle Monungai very late on day 3, maybe this is a much more pass-heavy set than what Lions fans saw from Ben Johnson with Sonic and Knuckles, having Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, which I think could open up a lot of opportunities for Colston Loveland going number 10 overall. Number 3 on our 7 from 77 is number 13 in the NFL draft. This is probably the biggest surprise on the positive end of a Michigan Wolverine getting drafted. Heard a lot of Kenneth Grant to the Chargers. That was where I thought he was going to end up at 22, but it is Miami securing Kenneth Grant. How do you size up KG's fit with the Dolphins?
I think it's a great fit. They lost a couple of guys over the last couple of years in free agency, defensive tackles. So it was one I didn't necessarily think they would address this early in the draft, but obviously they did, and I think he fits perfectly. They run an odd front, so he's going to play a lot more nose, right on top of the center, and they'll shade him. They'll move things around. Nobody ever plays just odd or even or anything like that anymore. There's always a combination of those, but he's a big body that's going to eat up a lot of room on the inside there and with room to grow, not just as a player in terms of technique and pad level, but as a human. He's already a massive human being, but as he goes from 21 to 22 to 23, he's just going to fill out a little bit more. And I can only imagine what that's going to look like when God's gift of football continues to improve. But I think it's a great fit in Miami.
A gift from the football gods. Yeah. Yes, the phrasing for Mason and Kenneth. And hey, when you're hearing that about a true freshman, was that spring ball or was that going into fall camp when Jim Harbaugh said that?
I think it was going into fall camp, and it might, I think we asked him about the freak list, and it might have been right after he was on the freak list, and he was a little bit further down the list than I think anybody really expected. But we've all seen what he can do. I mean, it's unbelievable.
We thought, it's tough not to think that that's a bit of hyperbole when you were hearing that about true freshmen, but then they go and be 2 top 13 picks in the NFL draft as true juniors leaving. Yeah, they were gifts from the football god, and they are national champions and now NFL first rounders. Number 4 on our 7 from 77. I think the player that we probably all thought maybe was Michigan's number 1 prospect this time last year, looking ahead after the national championship season. Will Johnson had to wait till the middle of round 2. He goes 47th to Arizona, a team that runs some zone looks from a secondary standpoint. Feels like a good fit, but your thoughts on the fall, the potential health issues that were cited, all of it that sent a top 10 talent from, I think, most prognosticators down to number 47.
Yeah, well, they're going to get great value if he's able to stay healthy, and that was the big question. You know, was it a toe during the season? Was it a hamstring at the combine? Was it a knee? Was being reported by Adam Schefter on Thursday, the day of the first round. Whatever it is, all he has to do is be healthy now, and they're going to get an unbelievable player. And for Arizona, with Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. offensively, they've got some weapons there, and I know they addressed it with the offensive line last year, and they're still going to do that. But 6 of their 7 picks were on the defensive side. They had a clear emphasis of what they needed to do to improve in the NFC. What is it? The NFC West, and their odds of either winning a division, making the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and obviously Walter Nolan, their first round pick, defensive tackle, Will Johnson. And again, we saw at times the huge upside of Will Johnson. He's a guy that's going to study the film. He's going to do everything he possibly can to be ready when he's healthy. And when he's healthy, we saw, 2 pick sixes this year. We saw he was the MVP of the national championship game. He has the ability to change games and be a shutdown corner. If they're able to get that in the second round, because then they would edge with Jordan Birch in the third, the fourth, Cody Simon, linebacker, who we're familiar with from Ohio State, Denzel Burke, another cornerback from Ohio State, and they rounded it out at the very end with Keaton Crawford, a safety from Nevada. So they went heavy defense, and they're a contestant. I'm not going to give it away right now for one of the teams that maybe had the best draft of the bunch.
I'll go for this coming season. I think they're a sleeper in the NFC. I think they are a team that can go win their division. They won't be picked by many, but I like what they've done. If Kyler Murray can take not a huge step, but just a little bit of a step, there's
That's
a lot
all
there.
He has is little steps.
Oh, come on, John. Come on. That is, jeez.
You set me up for that one.
I really did. I don't know where to go. I will say it was really cool, the Marvin Harrison Jr. picture of him and Will Johnson at the big house that he posted.
Yeah.
You've talked about it. Obviously, there is a very firm rivalry. We all know that. But when Buckeyes and Wolverines play together at the next level, look at the Browns, right? Quinson Judkins goes as Cleveland's 3rd pick, their 2nd rounder, with Mason Graham. There's that. Once they get on the same team, there's obviously going to be plenty of talking come November between those two and between Will and Marvin. But there is a respect there, knowing that they've come from some big-time programs.
Those are the guys that you want on your team. You can't take everybody from Michigan with you. Not everybody belongs in the NFL. But when you have when we have players and teammates from Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, they know what big games feel like. They know what preparation is like. They are trained to be good at the next level, and it doesn't always hit, but those are the teammates that you want. And there will be some friendly banter. It's the fans, the fanaticals, I should say, are where that rivalry takes a completely different tone and a different level. But for those guys for 3, 4, 5 years in college, yeah, it's an absolute drop down, drag out, scratch, claw fight. But then when you make that switch to the NFL, hey, it doesn't matter. We want those guys on our team.
Hoping for similar interactions in Arizona and Cleveland like we saw last year in D.C., your old stomping grounds, with Mikey Sainer still asking Terry McLaurin a couple questions at a press conference. I think he was rocking the maize and blue, if I recall correctly.
I believe you are right.
Love that. All right, number 5 on our 7 from 77. There was another fascinating landing spot for a Wolverines defender on day 2. It is Josiah Stewart going number 90 to the Rams. LA did a great job last draft of really restocking their defense and propelling them to a playoff berth. They gave the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles the best game in the postseason in the divisional round. Feels like a win now spot, maybe an urgent win now spot with Matt Stafford getting old. How does Josiah Stewart fit in?
Oh, he fits in. I mean, with a young defensive front, when you think about Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, and then you throw Josiah Stewart in the mix, the rotation, because like I talked about, he's not, at least at this point, going to be a 3-down guy. He's going to be a guy that they bring in second long, third long, passing down situations, change up guy. And we saw last year, he's a guy that they can also show rush and then drop into the flat. He did a tremendous, a very underrated skill set that he developed over the last couple of years here at Michigan. But his number one thing is see quarterback, get quarterback. And in that defense, he's going to have all the opportunity in the world. And we talk about Cleveland and obviously, Mason Graham and Myles Garrett, a completely different way of approaching the quarterback. It's just physical dominance at that point. But in this Rams defense, I see a world where Jared Verse bumps down, Josiah Stewart is on the same side, and now you're trying to create those one-on-one matchups with great athletes. And maybe it's one with Verse that you want to create with a guard, and Josiah, it's a tackle. Or with Braden Fisk, it could be honestly the same thing. So there's just a lot going on in regards to how they can operate up front with so much talent trying to create those mismatches defensively.
6'1", 245 is what I'm seeing for Josiah Stewart's listed height, weight. Do you think he has to add much, if anything, to his weight to be an NFL edge rusher?
He doesn't have to. But if he gets 255, 260, and he doesn't lose any quickness, any speed, which I 100% think he will, it may take a year, 18 months, 2 years. But yeah, he eventually gets there, and it'll add just to his repertoire. Now, I mean, we saw a little bit of power, but his thing was speed. It was athleticism, it was change of direction. If he can add a little bit more power to those NFL tackles, just another thing for those guys to think about. Yeah, it'll just add to what he can do.
Number 6 on our 7 from 77, 2 Wolverines going in round number 6. Fits for Kalel Mullings, 188th overall to Tennessee. Feels like a really interesting bruising type, maybe goal line back with the Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears combination. And then, hey, the Eagles dip into the Michigan offensive line for a second consecutive season as Trevor Keegan now joined by Miles Hinton, who goes 191 to the defending champs.
Yeah, I like the third change-up weapon that Kalel Mullins brings to Tony Pollard and the Tajay Spears combo that they have in Tennessee. He's a completely different look. He's also a guy that is not going to be just a running back. We talked about it. He's got that defensive background as well. He's not going to play defense, but special teams is really where he's going to excel early in his career, just waiting for the opportunity. And for him, it's going to be more reps, more opportunity to feel, see, and do in an offense as he continues to learn that running back position. He's only played it 2 years. I know he's got some background in high school, but it's completely different level at the major college level, and obviously another few steps up to the pro level. So as he continues to learn that position, he'll be very valuable to Tennessee. And in regards to Miles Hinton, what a great opportunity to go to a team that has a very established offensive line. He's not going to be breaking in as a starter, but he's a guy that will get a chance to learn behind a Jordan Mailata or a Lane Johnson, who are like Jordan's much younger than Lane Johnson. Both of those guys still playing at the top of their game. It just gives him an opportunity to season a little bit more, develop a little bit more, and when called upon, he can go in there and play. And this to me is a pick for the Eagles' future.
I think most picks for the Eagles are for the Eagles' future because they are just so loaded. And boy, that is an outstanding organization to go into, and not really a hot take there. Number 7 on our 7 from 77, 4 other Wolverines who did not hear their names called over the 3-day event last weekend in Green Bay have latched in to organizations. What intrigues you about any or all of these landing spots? Donovan Edwards to the New York Jets, Makari Page to the New York Giants, Josh Preeb to the Miami Dolphins, and William Wagner, the long snapper, to the Cincinnati Bengals.
I mean, the key for these guys is to go in and make great friends with the special team coach, and just go in there and work your tails off, which I believe all three of them will do, and William Wagner as well. But that's a different conversation when we're talking about long snapper. But for those three guys, go in there. It's seen and not heard. Go out there and until you make some plays in practice, which I believe they will. And for Donovan, going into an offense that's going to be new, obviously unsettled at quarterback. It's one of those situations where, hey, I can catch. You want me to line up as a slot receiver? No problem. I'll do that. You want me to line up as a running back, catch the ball out of the backfield, run the ball, all of those different things. He's going to get that opportunity, and he just needs to be able to show that he can run to daylight.
Well, Aaron Glenn spent some time, obviously, in Southeast Michigan. It's his first season as a head coach there, and there have been some rumblings about the potential of a Breece Hall trade or something along those lines. Obviously, the Jets brought in a couple of running backs last season. I don't think they had a running back this year drafted, if I recall correctly. They did not. So we shall see. Any surprises of guys who didn't get any UDFA deal? I was a little surprised with his surge down the stretch that Amir Hall didn't get a look, at least as of now.
Yeah, Amir Hall, Wesley Walker, those guys are still working out. Quentin Johnson was hurt, had the hamstring. I do think all three of those guys will find their way into an NFL training camp. It's just going to take a little bit longer, but as you get closer, right, guys are going to get hamstrings, guys are going to have injuries, and then all of a sudden it opens up a roster spot. And all you're looking for, if you're an undrafted guy, especially if you're an undrafted guy that doesn't get picked up, is can I latch on to a practice squad? Can I just find a way? Because practice squads are huge anymore. And once you do, especially if you're with an organization, and I'll just use the Lions as an example, they have no issue bringing a guy up for a week or sending them down for another week. But those guys are at practice. They're put into the offense. They're trained. They're coached just like some of those starters are. They don't get as many reps, so you're going to have to be disciplined mentally. When that opportunity presents itself, you got to go out there and perform. But if you can get on one of those practice squads with a team that is going to be loyal, you're going to have your opportunity. And maybe it just takes another year of development. And all of a sudden, hey, now you work your way up the list a little bit. And then maybe in year 2, 3, or 4, because you can actually make a decent living being on the practice squad these days. It's not like it used to be. Now all of a sudden you catch an eye of someone, whether it's a preseason game or it's an opportunity for that 1 week you come up and then they send you back down. Now all of a sudden one of the other 31 teams has an injury. They saw you, they saw what you've done, they saw your development, and now they pick you up. And it's just another opportunity. It's a path. It's not the best path, but it is one that is followed by a lot of guys that don't initially make a roster.
So that is our 7 from 77 here this week. Normally we have a guest, but wanted to break down more of the NFL draft. For those who are on our YouTube live stream, be sure to check out the audio version. John mentioned it off the top, Go Blue Podcasts. We had a great conversation John did with Sharon Moore last week. That's still very pertinent. If you missed it from last week, we've got Defend the Block, Conquering Heroes. So be sure to check all that out if you are a YouTube or an X streamer. On the audio side, if you are new to any sort of video stuff, we encourage you to join us. It'll be a little bit more intermittent over the next few months, but we do have some live streams coming, most of them Tuesdays at 11:15 a.m. Our next one will be 2 weeks from now. That will be on May the 13th. So I hope you can join us for those. We'll have plenty of great interviews, audio side as well. But we're bringing everybody this final part as we continue to break down the NFL draft. And had a great YouTube comment here from Moose saying, 7 Michigan draftees, 3 in the top 15. Not bad for an off year. Yeah, Michigan didn't have obviously a playoff qualifying season or anything along those lines. I think what makes this class so impressive is that the top 4 guys who went for Michigan were third-year juniors, and they all, if you think back right now, you can probably come up with an instant memory of one of those 4 guys making an impact play as sophomores en route to the national championship. And that's what's special about this group is that they went into the 2024 season and everybody knew, barring an injury issue like Will Johnson had, they were going to be first-round picks.
Yeah, I mean, they've got that championship pedigree. They've performed. in the biggest moments at the highest levels that they've played at. Now, will that translate? Sure, some of those experiences will definitely translate. The pressure, the length of the season, everything it's more matched up now with what the college football is doing, with the way the college football playoffs is and how it extends into January. But there are some things where, okay, there's going to be a learning curve for all of these guys, and it doesn't matter if you're Mason Graham or if you're Josh Preeb. Like there's a learning curve for all these guys. But I think it's a feather in the cap. It's a major asset to have the experience that I played a national championship game. I was a major contributor. And it's also those guys like a Kalel Mullins where, he wanted to be RB1, but he didn't get that until his last year at Michigan. And he was patient. He was willing to play different positions. When you have that willingness of, coach, whatever you need right now is what I'm willing to do, whether it's special teams, offense, defense, doesn't matter, change positions. That's a huge selling point for these NFL teams when it comes down to 53 and you're trying to figure out, how can we be more versatile with some of these players? Can we have a guy that plays 2 or 3 positions that maybe he's number 53 on our roster, but he plays 2 or 3 positions? Now all of a sudden, hey, you become much more valuable because you could do so much more.
I mean, think about it. When Kalel Mullins got here, he didn't want to be RB1. He wanted to be linebacker 1.
Yeah.
Goes to show you the growth, the ability to make yourself valuable. I think Kalel Mullins is going to have himself a pretty long, for a 6th-round pick, I think he's going to have a longer career than most because of his versatility. And, hey, you can get the tough yard or 2, and that's critical in the NFL.
Yeah, it's going to be solid. There's no question about it.
Yeah. All right. I don't know how many you went deep on this, but just your best and worst NFL draft classes. We'll start positively here today. What were some of your best NFL draft classes?
Well, one of them is, we've already talked about Cleveland, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but this is a team that backs are against the wall with a horrific contract that they're saddled with Deshaun Watson. And
you had an $80 million cap hit for your 5th-string quarterback isn't ideal?
Yeah, it blows my mind. It's so entertaining to watch from afar, but you're going to need cheap young talent, especially when you go out and you give Myles Garrett a record-setting contract. It just adds to the complexity of the salary cap. How do you get underneath it? And I think they went out and saved the 2 quarterbacks that they took, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. They might get good value out of those guys as being a backup. To me, both of those guys probably end up on the practice squad. Maybe they trade back and forth throughout the course of the year as to who's up and who's QB3, who's on the practice squad. But the ability to develop those guys and see what they can do in a year or 2, I think is worth the chance. But Mason Graham, they got a very solid linebacker in 2nd round in Schlesinger from UCLA. We know what Quinshon Judkins can do from that running back position when healthy. And with trade rumors and who are they going to sign, or re-sign in the backfield, I think that's a solid pickup. And not far from here, but Harold Fannin Jr., I think is a quiet steal in this draft as a tight end. He's going to be a weapon, and maybe he's just a blocking tight end for a year or 2. He's not going to be, the number 1 target, but he's as solid as they come in regards to knowing what he's going to do, being in the right place at the right time, and I think he could develop into a really good tight end.
117 catches for 1,555 yards and 10 touchdowns for Harold Fannin Jr. Yes, it's at Bowling Green, a MAC school, but he put up legitimate performances against Bowling Green's 2, quote, bye games, the reverse, where they had to go on the road. He had 11 catches for 137 yards at Penn State, 8 catches, 145 yards, both with 1 touchdown at Texas A&M. And it's not one of those, they knew it was going there, and he came up with it. Who else to you thrived in the first or in the overall draft?
Well, it's interesting. I'm gonna stick in the AFC, and I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Bills as one of the better drafts. And I know that their general manager, his name escapes me at the moment, had a contentious conversation with one of the local radio hosts. And
the Brandon Bean show was a little rocky this week.
Yeah. But I mean, they did have one of the best offenses in the NFL. And Josh, they have a cheat code. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen are a couple of cheat codes in the NFL. When you have guys that can do what they do. And one of the questions I had going into last year was they lost so many guys in free agency offensively. Would they still be able to be quality offensively and not have to rely too much on Josh Allen to be the sole provider for points? Now, he was a big one, right? In being able to rush and score touchdowns with his feet, being able to extend plays, get the ball downfield. But I thought they did a tremendous job last year. A lot of those guys are back, and they added a couple of things in free agency. But you could tell that this was a draft that they wanted to address the defense. If they're going to compete with Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and even I'll throw Cincinnati. I know Cincinnati didn't have a great year last year, but with Joe Burrow and that offense, they're going to have to to bulk up that defense. And they started with a corner in the first round. Second round, they went with the defensive tackle Sanders out of South Carolina, an edge and Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, defensive tackle, cornerback. They really addressed the defense. Now, how much are you going to expect all those guys to be performers or contributors in year one, even if you hit on 2 or 3 of them to be guys that are reps eaters and eventually produce? I think they had a really good draft.
And here's the reality. I think the main point of contention with that Buffalo local interview was wide receiver. And of course, the Bills went out and got Keon Coleman last year. They traded for Amari Cooper, who really didn't do a whole lot down the stretch last season. I think you kind of saw with the fact that the Panthers took Tet McMillan at 8, even though a lot of people had them going defense because Carolina had one of the worst defenses out there. This wide receiver class was far from last year's with Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, Malik Neighbors at 6, Rome Odunze at 9, Brian Thomas and Xavier Worthy late in the first round. That was a loaded class. This outside the top 10, I'm not sold on Matthew Golden. I think Emeka Egbuka is a really solid receiver. I don't think he'll ever be a star, but he fits well. I was a little surprised he went to Tampa Bay because of who they already have at wide receiver. I liked what I saw from Jalen McMillan last year, the kid from Washington, who I think was a 3rd-round pick for them. But this draft was not littered with it. I'm not going to knock really any organization that, quote, needed a receiver that didn't go get one if it wasn't in the top 10.
Yeah, I'm not either. And the Carolina Panthers, they're getting brutalized a little bit for their draft, but I think I talked about this last year. I know I talked about it on the morning show. Tet McMillan, to me, was the best receiver in this. I think the one that is going to have the biggest impact. So they go out and get Bryce Young, a number 1 target, a guy that could catch anything in his zip code, and Nick Scorton from Texas A&M as an edge guy. In those first 2 rounds, the problem that I think a lot of people are having with Carolina's draft is they're a team that needs so much. There are a lot of rosters. It's not like Kansas City, who's drafting for 1 or 2 roster spots that are open, and then everybody else is developmental, or the Lions, who are looking for 2 or 3 guys. They have a number of spots to fill, and once you get out of those top 2 rounds, I wasn't a big fan of their draft. So it's kind of a mixed bag as we transition from those that are good drafts to those that are bad. For Carolina, I think it's a little bit of both.
So fire away. Who were some classes that you did not like as much?
Well, I mean, it's Cincinnati. There's just nobody in that class. One of the issues that they have is protecting Joe Burrow. They've put so many assets into their wide receiver group and into being able to throw the ball downfield. And I know in round 3, they went with the guard from Georgia, Dylan Fairchild, but I don't know that he's going to be a day 1 starter. I think he's a backup on the interior offensive line. And to me, they just didn't do enough to address. It's great to be able to get the ball downfield, and they got a lot of weapons. if I were them, I would have gone, in that first round and been able to find a way to protect Joe Burrow a little bit more. Now, I know defensively that was their big struggle last year. They were putting up points, they were finding ways, but Joe Burrow he's been nicked up, he's been dinged up, he's been hit in his very young career. Great numbers, but he has taken just way too many hits, way too many sacks. And with the, with the uncertain future of Trey Hendrickson, I'd somewhat understand them going with Shamar Stewart, the edge opposite Scholarton at Texas A&M in the first round. I think he'll be productive, and it'll be a nice upgrade with him with Trey Hendrickson. I just don't see which they're trying to fill a lot of holes, and I don't necessarily know that they accomplished what they needed to accomplish.
Any other worse classes, or do you want to get into the surprises of the first round, which I think might coincide? You seemed a little skeptical of the Jacksonville side of that trade involving Travis Hunter.
Yeah, we can move on. Yeah. Sure. And I'll start there.
Let's talk about that, because it was something that we've now learned through reporting had been set for more than 2 weeks. There were some rumblings on Thursday afternoon, the day of the first round, that there might be something brewing, and nothing was really solidified. Jay Glazer put out a video or a tweet or both, I don't know, at like 7:30 for the 8 o'clock start, that this was basically in place. Your thoughts on a huge move up, 3 spots, which you never see this type of a return or a give up in Jacksonville standpoint for a non-quarterback.
Yeah, and so Travis Hunter is, a lot of eyeballs are going to be on him. Obviously, he's the Heisman winner, and he plays on both sides of the ball, and he was very adamant that he wanted to go to a team that was going to use him on both sides. In fact, I think he went as far as to say, I'm not playing if I can't play on both sides. You better hit, and he better be exceptional at one of those. And if he's, if he's that on both sides of the ball, now you're getting a guy that can affect every single play when he's on the field. I just think that they gave up, and maybe that was, obviously they're willing to do it, but they gave up so much in this draft and in next year's draft to move up 3 spots. Now, Travis Hunter wouldn't have been on the board at number 5, but they've got to find a way to be more effective offensively. And when you look at a young quarterback, I know he's in his second contract and you paid him a whole lot of money. You better find a way to be more productive offensively, or you're just going to plan on winning a whole lot, or hopefully winning a lot of 13-10 games.
Reality is, this draft requires Travis Hunter to live up to expectation and Trevor Lawrence to live up to expectation, which has not happened yet. You're high on Tet McMillan. I know there were other components to the trade, including Jacksonville sending out its second-round pick this year. I think it was 36. That was the Quinshon Judkins pick by Cleveland. Would you rather have Travis Hunter and your and not have your first-round pick next year, or Tet McMillan at 5 and keep your first-rounder next year?
I'd rather have Tet McMillan and pair him up with that quarterback, and now all of a sudden you can be an effective offense, and you could be an offense that is a threat to put the ball downfield. You're an offense that has a threat when it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, that you can convert those. And right now, I don't think they're that threat.
Other surprises from the first round, to me, probably the biggest other one involved the other first-round pick that was sent out. Atlanta moving up to 26 with the Rams to select James Pierce Jr., who seemed to be one that had some big-time fans and some other folks who maybe thought he was a more of a second-round grade. That's a lot to give up without – listen, I thought Michael Penix Jr. showed some flashes last year, but you are giving up a first-round pick for a team that is no guarantee to be a playoff team or even a playoff contender. And if you're trading, a pick that's in the top 12 to 14, that is a massive asset to roll the dice on, especially for an edge rusher.
It is. And this is one of those where I know everybody likes to put a grade on, is this an A grade? This is a B draft for this team, C, D, E, all the way down. when I look at most of the drafts, I don't know that there was anybody that I would get an E or an F to, but it's really hard to grade a draft, especially one where you give up a lot of capital until you see 2, 3, 4 years down the road how that draft plays out. And how does the player that you ultimately coveted, that you went up to get, do they outplay missing out on that draft capital, that second round pick that you could have paired with the first?
Any other surprises? The Chargers did not take a Michigan Wolverine. Only Will Johnson was available there, and they passed on him because of the injury issues. Omarion Hampton goes to Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I think he'll be a busy man this rookie year.
I believe so. And I guess the biggest surprise, one we talked about already, was Kenneth Grant. I didn't see him going that high. I know he's got that ceiling, he's got that potential, but that was a bit of a surprise. I think the only other one that I would call a bit of a surprise would be Dallas taking a guard, Tyler Booker. I know they need to revamp that offensive line. And I forget who the guy's name. They just had a guard retire, so they're hoping to replace
Zach Martin, right?
Yeah, Zach Martin. One, Hall of Famer, and they're hoping that Booker fills those shoes. Now he could certainly fill them. He's a big dude, but the production, I'm just not sure that they're going to get the value out of drafting a guard at 12. I just don't see him having the same talent. And this is where maybe I have some, bias. If you're going to take a guy at 12, it's got to be like a Steve Hutchinson, a guy that it's plug and play. There's no doubt he's going to plug in there on day one, and he's going to be a stalwart of that offensive line. I just don't see Booker being that guy at the guard position.
Bleacher Report had a quote from Tyler Booker, the new guard for the Cowboys. People get so excited to play football until they come across Tyler Booker. I start to see that love leave their eyes. That's what makes me love the game. I would have moved him up a few spots on my board if I heard that quote.
Yeah, but then you turn on the film and
I get it.
I mean, who was the edge that Detroit picked in regards to, I would die for Dan Campbell. And I forget his name. He's from Egypt and Boise State edge defender. Yeah, I think, when you're taken in the 5th, 6th, 7th, when you're taken at any point, right, you're willing to be loyal to that team, do anything you can to make that team and fulfill your dream. That's the team that's given you an opportunity. And that's all you're looking for, is a chance, a foot in the door. And you could say whatever you want. I know we're going to talk about Shedeur Sanders, but what I saw from him was, I know he had this whole room designed so that they could party after the first round, and second round comes and goes, third round comes and goes, fourth round comes and goes. He's not taking to the 5th round, and there's nobody left in that room except him and his brother. And when he gets the call, the official call, that he is going to the Cleveland Browns, he looked genuinely excited and happy just to have an opportunity. And you got to love that. Whether you like the kid or not, whether you think he's sandbag interviews or not, I don't care. This is a guy that he thought, and a lot of people thought, he was going to be a first rounder. He slides all the way to the 5th, yet when he gets the call, he's genuinely excited to have an opportunity to play in the NFL.
Yeah, let's talk about the quarterback landing spots. Shedeur in a moment, but has there ever been a number 1 overall pick talked about less than Tennessee's Cam Ward?
It's funny because he's got a great story, right? It's
totally.
He
started at Incarnate Word,
and then he goes up to Washington State. And unless you're Ryan Leaf, no one knows even where Washington State plays. And then all of a sudden he transfers to Miami. And I think one of the best decisions, the decision that I think we'll see not just quarterbacks make, but a lot of players make, and that is to come back and maximize your earning potential at the college level. Looking back on it now, and we're just taking some high-profile guys, Shedeur Sanders, huge pay cut going to the NFL. Quinn Ewers, a monumental pay cut going to the NFL. These guys had an opportunity to make millions of dollars at the college level. They go and they find out, well, I'm not as coveted as maybe I thought or was being reported. And I guarantee you, whether they want to admit to it or not, they're living their dream. They're in the NFL now. I think they'd like to make that decision over and say, you know what, I'll take the millions of dollars and put it off. I think we're going to see that a lot. And I was even asked the question earlier today, how many of the guys in this draft it would make that decision now to go back to college, and whether it's to enter the transfer portal or to make money for their school versus what they found out what their value is in the NFL draft. And it's probably just about everybody. This is, if you had eligibility, just about anybody that was picking outside the first round because of the numbers that are being thrown around in college football right now.
Yeah, the one I would wonder about would be Jalen Milroe. Because that's a really interesting location for him in Seattle. It seems like they're kind of in a transition year. Jury is still very much out on Sam Darnold being a long-term guy. So he's the one that I would say, you know what, maybe he feels like he's landed in a good enough spot. But yeah, Sanders, Ewers, several others.
Yeah. One thing I did like about the quarterback draft is, and this Michigan fans will appreciate this, Kyle McCord was off the board before Will Howard.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was the fall guy for Ryan Day, for that Buckeye team that lost 2 years ago to Michigan. And he went to Syracuse, had himself a really good year. It wasn't drafted, 4 spots ahead of Will Howard, but just the fact that he went above him, I think his upside is probably actually a little bit better. I think he's going to a great spot in Philly where there's not going to be any pressure, no pressure to go out there and play. They've got their starting quarterback, and you know what? It's sit there, learn, show what you can do in preseason games. If something happens to the starter, you go in for a half. Maybe you got to play for another game. You can show what you can do. It'll be a limited offense. Defenses aren't going to be designed to stop you. Go out there and show what you can do. I think that might be the best landing spot of just about any of these quarterbacks.
So who are let me ask you this. In 5 years from this class, who will be a starting quarterback in the NFL? I do think Cam Ward is a pretty safe. I don't know if he's going to be elite, but I feel like he does enough to. What's that?
How far out did you say? 7 years?
5 years.
5 years.
Is it just Cam Ward?
I say none of them.
You don't think Cam Ward?
No, I think he'll be okay. I don't think he'll ever develop into a franchise quarterback. Best chances, sure, Cam Ward, because of his size, because of his ability to make plays off schedule, the arm angles. We always hear that. He's able to do some of those things, but if he doesn't make that decision to transfer to Miami and stay that extra year in college football, last year he's not a first-round quarterback. Now, you are given the right to get better, and he did improve, and he improved his draft stock. But if you put any of these quarterbacks in last year's draft, I don't think there's a first-round quarterback in this bunch. That's why I was not surprised that Shedeur fell as far as he did. I talked about it last week. I didn't think he was a first-round quarterback. I didn't think there was going to be anybody other than Cam Ward taken in the first round. Now, Jackson Dart, it's going to be interesting because I think this is going to be one of those situations where he's thrown into the fire, not ready, not prepared, and he's going to get brutalized in New York, and it might ruin him for the rest of his career. He might have had a chance if he had gone to a different team where, yeah, he gets a chance to sit or at least compete for a starting spot instead of going in and expected to be the starter, the savior, the guy that comes in and has a Jaden Daniels type of season.
Yeah, that front office is very much on the hot seat, which could precipitate an earlier than necessary arrival into the starting lineup. Lastly, thoughts on the Lions draft. And I do think one of the surprises from round one was the fact that Detroit took Tyleik Williams at 28, someone who wasn't on many, if any, first-round boards.
Yeah, and so Tyleik Williams, it's interesting, too, because we just had a chance to talk to Brad Holmes earlier today. And I think it's always funny when we see mock drafts, and you and I have all admitted, right? And we did our, top 10 mock draft. They're not worth the paper they're written on. And we don't get to see, or we do over the course of a couple of years, but we're not taking Tyleik Williams and studying every single play over the last 2 or 3 years that he played. We're not taking a look at the situations that he's in, and so our evaluation is somewhat limited. It's not as in depth as some of these other teams, or as in fact any 32 of the GMs that have unbelievable scouting departments and the ability to evaluate players all the way down to Mr. Irrelevant. It's interesting when a guy jumps into the first round or a guy falls out of the first round. The evaluation that these teams have done, some of it's need, some of it's runs, and each draft is going to take on its own, identity. We saw that even this year. But Tyleik Williams, I think, is a great fit for the Detroit Lions because Aleem McNeil's not going to be available at the start of the year. In fact, he might not be available because of that torn ACL that happened against Buffalo. He might not be available until Thanksgiving. And so you have a definite need. And at that time, that was the best player on their board that could also fill a need. Tate Ratledge, another guy that they traded up 3 spots to get him. And that just shows you how important it was for them to, as Brad Holmes puts it, water the garden, and continue to bring youth and talent to that offensive line. And I see a world this year where we love Graham Glasgow. He's had a great career, and there's still great value in him being a part of this Detroit Lions team. But you've got Christian Mahogany at one guard spot. You got Tate Ratledge at the other, and it's all anchored by Frank Ragnow. And then Graham is the guy that backs up all 3. I think they're in a great position for developing those young players, getting good production out of them. I expect Tate to be a day 1 starter because of what we saw at Georgia. And he's another guy, 2-time, NCAA champ and college football playoffs. He's been tested. He's 37 starts, I think is what I read at one point. He's a guy that should come in and play right away.
All right. Well, that will just about wrap things up. I do want to get one hot take here from the chat before we leave. LW saying that Quinn Ewers will replace Tua Tagovailoa sooner than later. Watch. So we'll be on Tua watch here with the 7th rounder Quinn Ewers. You buy it, John?
Well, the only way he replaces them is if Tua forgets what day of the week it is. He's had the concussion issues. He's going to get hit again. I think we all realize that he's going to have – this is something that they're going to have to deal with. I don't know that there's a season where he plays all 17 regular season games again. Quinn Ewers will be called upon. And, as a 7th-round pick, why not take a shot on him? And this is a guy that took Texas into the college football playoffs. He was – the talent is there. It's just a matter of, will he be able to, at his size, be an effective NFL quarterback? Will his arm strength become an issue? Will his mobility, will his ability to read defenses be an issue? All of those things will be sorted out. He'll get some time. He's not going to go in as day 1 starter, but I do think, I don't know that he replaces him, but I think he may be the guy that goes in there and is the guy that has to step in while Tua is recovering.
Well, and who knows? Maybe Tyler Shuck will still be a starter in 5 years if he doesn't retire for the Saints.
Yeah. We'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch as these guys, the quarterback position is maybe the most unpredictable position. And I know if you're not taken in the first round, right, there's always a Jalen Hurts. There's a Lamar Jackson.
Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick?
Oh, I heard that before. I did hear that. So there are examples, but it's such a – I did hear this, though. And let's see. The only 5th-round quarterback that was drafted, obviously in the 5th round, that ended up making a Pro Bowl was Mark Brunell. And I think there were, in fact, I could tell you exactly. I think I have it right here. I think there have been, it's either 86 or 96. No, he's the 68th. I was not even close. 68th quarterback taken in the 5th round, and only one of them has been a Pro Bowl quarterback.
So you're saying there's a chance?
Yes, there is a chance. Yep.
Well, I just hope someone loves us and cares about our cause as much as Mel Kiper Jr. was locked in on Shedeur Sanders' cause all weekend long. We can only, man.
And you think about all the hot takes, and I'm not much of a hot take guy, and I know you're not either. I don't really believe in that type of radio. But when you get on a soapbox and you beat that drum as loud as Mel Kiper did, all of the things that you have said before come back and haunt you. And he had a quote about Jimmy Clausen. I'm sure you've seen this. At the time, if Jimmy Clausen's not a star in this league, I'm out. I'm done. Well, Mel Kiper's still doing it, and Jimmy Clausen.
There he was eating that pumpkin pie in the 7th round on Saturday. He's still locked in. It looked good. It looked like some good pumpkin pie, but
sure.
Yeah. All right. Looking ahead for the audio listeners, we will have some great interviews with some Wolverines post spring ball coming up next week. And over the course of May, our next live stream will be 2 weeks from this live recording, which will be May 13th, a Tuesday. And we'll keep those going throughout the course of the summer. Not quite every week, but around every other. So that'll do it. For Jon Jansen, I'm Brian Bush. Thanks so much for listening, for watching here on In the Trenches, presented by Meyer.